The boarding house door slammed so hard the boys flinched. Sarah didn't. She'd learned not to flinch anymore. Mrs. Pritchard stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her starched apron, face hard as the Wyoming winter descending around them. I don't rent to women without husbands. Bad for my reputation. Sarah held her youngest son closer. Tommy was 5, shivering despite the blanket wrapped around his thin shoulders. Ben stood beside her, 8 years old and trying to be brave. Jacob, 11, had already climbed back onto the wagon, jaw set, eyes burning with the kind of anger that came from understanding too much too young. Please, Sarah said quietly, just for the night. The storm's coming. Should have thought of that before your husband got himself killed. Mrs. Pritchard stepped back, reaching for the door. Good evening, Mrs. Brennan. The door shut, the lock clicked. Sarah stood on the porch for a moment. Snow beginning to fall in heavy, wet flakes. She could feel the town watching. Every window on Main Street had a face behind it, lamplight making them glow like judges' eyes. No one moved. No one spoke. Across the street, Mr. Calhoun stood in the window of his bank, arms crossed, mouth curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. She'd seen that look before. It was the look of a man who enjoyed watching people fall. Ben whispered, "What do we do?" Sarah turned from the door. Her wagon sat at the hitching post, everything they owned packed into 2 battered trunks. 1 horse, ribs showing, head hanging low. 3 boys. No money left, no family within $200 She looked at the wilderness trail leading out of town into the dark hills beyond. The temperature was dropping fast. The wind was rising. If they stayed in town, they'd freeze in the wagon. If they left, we'll camp past the ridge, she said, climbing onto the seat. Tommy whimpered. Jacob said nothing. The wagon creaked forward. Snow gathered on the boys' shoulders like burial shrouds. As they reached the edge of town, Sarah glanced back once. Every light in Coldwater burned warm and bright. Every door stayed closed. She turned away. They were a mile into the darkness when she saw him, a rider on the ridge above, silhouette sharp against the dying light, watching, waiting. Her hand moved toward the rifle beneath the seat. The rider began to descend. The rider didn't ask her name, didn't ask her story, just turned his horse and said, "Follow me." Sarah's hand stayed on the rifle. "I don't know you." "No, ma'am." His voice was low, steady. "Not friendly, but not cruel either. But I know that trail you're on leads nowhere. And I know this storm will kill you and them boys by midnight. We'll manage. You won't." Tommy's teeth chattered so hard Sarah felt it through her coat. Ben had stopped talking an hour ago. Old West stories. Even Jacob, stubborn as his father, had pulled his hat down low, surrendering to the cold. The rider waited. Snow gathered on his hat brim. "Why?" Sarah asked, because he turned his horse. "Follow or don't, your choice." She followed. The cabin appeared after 20 minutes, small, weathered, but solid. Smoke rose from the chimney. A barn stood behind it, and beyond that, a single grave marker with a wooden cross. The rider dismounted and opened the cabin door. Firelight spilled out warm and golden. "Inside," he said. "All of you." The boys stumbled toward the heat like moths. Sarah hesitated at the threshold. The man pulled a canvas sheet from a peg on the wall, began stringing it across the middle of the room with practice efficiency. "Boys by the fire, you take the bed, I'll sleep in the barn. I won't take charity." He glanced at her, eyes shadowed beneath his hat. "Then call it a trade, you cook. I'll pretend it's charity so my pride don't suffer." Tommy collapsed in front of the fireplace. Ben beside him. Jacob stood rigid, watching the stranger with suspicion. Sarah looked around the cabin, clean, sparse, everything in its place. A man living alone. A man who'd been alone for a while. "There's stew in the pot," the man said. "Cowboy stories, beans in the barrel. Feed them. I'll tend your horse." He walked out before she could respond through the frosted window. Sarah watched him lead her exhausted mare toward the barn. He moved slowly, speaking to the animal in tones too low to hear. Then he stopped at the grave marker, hat in hand, snow gathering on his shoulders. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to come inside. Tommy was already asleep, curled against Ben. Jacob sat by the fire, arms wrapped around his knees. "Who is he?" "Ma," Ben asked. Sarah hung her wet coat by the door. "I don't know, baby." Aim, but she looked at the grave again. 2 names carved in the wood, Eleanor and Daniel Tucker. 1879, 3 years dead, and the man still slept in the barn. She ladled stew into bowls with shaking hands. The widow didn't sit still. Cole had noticed that first thing. always moving, mending, scrubbing, teaching the boys their letters by the fire. 3 days since the storm, the snow had stopped, but the cold hadn't. Sarah insisted on earning her keep. She'd patched his shirts, cooked meals that actually tasted like something, organized the chaos he'd been living in since Leonard died. The boys worked too. Jacob, serious and watchful, hauled water from the creek. Ben, cheerful despite everything, chopped kindling with fierce determination. Tommy shadowed Cole everywhere, silent as a ghost, watching with enormous eyes. Cole wasn't used to being watched anymore. He sat on the porch step carving a wooden horse for the boy. His shins shook, not from cold but from memory. Daniel had been 5 when the fever took him. Same age as Tommy, same hungry eyes. Eleanor had begged him to fetch the doctor, but the storm had been too fierce. The town too far. By the time he'd made it back, the knife slipped. Blood welled on his thumb. Mr. Romance in the Wild West Tucker. He looked up. Sarah stood in the doorway. Flour on her hands. You're bleeding. It's nothing. She came outside anyway. Tore a strip from her apron, wrapped his thumb with efficient gentleness. Her hands were rough, scarred from work. A widow's hands. Thank you, he said. For what? All of it. She sat beside him on the step. You didn't have to help us. Yes, I did. Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded on the trail. Cole stood instinct, moving his hand toward the rifle propped by the door. A rider appeared. Deputy Walsh, red-faced and uncomfortable. Tucker. Deputy Walsh dismounted, handed him a folded paper from the church council. Reverend Mills and Mr. Calhoun want you to know. Folks are concerned. Cole unfolded the note. Read it once, twice, Mr. Tucker. A widow woman staying unchaperoned in your home presents an improper situation. For the sake of decency and your reputation, we advise she be encouraged to move along. Town resources can assist with relocation. Signed, the council. Sarah had gone pale. She'd read it over his shoulder. Tell them, Cole said slowly, that she's staying till spring. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. Cole, they're serious. Calhoun's got influence. He can make trouble. Tell them the deputy left. Cole crumpled the note in his fist. Sarah's voice was quiet. I won't let them ruin you for helping us. They already ruined me, ma'am. 3 years back. He looked at the grave. This might be the first thing I'd done right since that afternoon. Cole began framing in addition 2 walls extending from the cabin's east side. Jacob appeared beside him, holding a hammer. What's this for? Reckon you boys need a proper room. Can't sleep on a floor forever. Jacob studied him. Why are you doing this? Cole drove a nail home. Because you're here and you need it. The boy picked up a board without another word. By sunset, the frame stood skeletal against the sky. Sarah watched from the window, one hand pressed to the glass. Cole didn't look back, but he felt her watching. For the first time in 3 years, the weight on his chest lifted just enough to breathe. The addition rose slow, one log at a time, one nail driven true like trust. Cole figured built in inches. December bled into January. The work continued. Jacob learned to notch logs, measure twice, cut once. Ben fetched tools. Singing songs, Sarah taught him. Tommy held nails, handed them up like precious offerings. Cole taught them to track rabbit, read weather, split wood without wasting motion. Sarah taught him to read slow progress. Embarrassing at first, but she never mocked him. Just pointed to words in her husband's Bible, patient as sunrise. The Lord is my shepherd. Cole read haltingly one evening. I shall not want. Good, Sarah said again. The boys were asleep behind the canvas divider. The fire burned low. Her shoulder touched his. He read it again. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something warmer than fire had begun to grow, but the town hadn't forgotten. They arrived on a bright Saturday, 4 men on horseback. Mr. Calhoun led them, flanked by Reverend Mills and 2 stone-faced elders. Cole met them in the yard, Jacob and Sarah watching from the porch. Tucker. Calhoun smiled. Cold as the snow. We're here as friends, concerned friends. That's so this situation. Calhoun gestured towards Sarah. It reflects poorly on you, on the church. We're asking respectfully that you reconsider this arrangement. Cole said nothing. Reverend Mills cleared his throat. Brother Tucker, we understand Christian charity, but a man alone with a woman, the appearance of impropriety. She's a widow with 3 children, Cole said flatly. Where do you propose they go? The county has resources, orphanages. No. Sarah stepped forward, voice shaking. You will not take my boys. Calhoun's smile widened. Mrs. Brennan, no one wants to take your sons, but without property, without means. The county has authority. She's under my protection. The words came out harder than Cole intended. The men exchanged glances. Your protection? Calhoun leaned forward in his saddle. Tucker, let's be plain. Your land has valuable water rights. Some might say you're exploiting this woman's situation to claim her late husband's mining shares. Some might question your motives. Cole's jaw tightened. The Lee was elegant, crafted to make him look either like a predator or a fool. I'd think on that carefully, Calhoun continued. Accidents happen to men with clouded judgment. Fires, fences cut, wells poisoned. Is that a threat? Just neighborly concern. They rode away. Cole stood in the yard, fists clenched, saying nothing. Sarah waited until they were gone. You should have defended us. I know, then why didn't you? He couldn't answer. Fear had locked his throat. Fear of losing everything again. Fear of fighting and failing. Fear of the grave he visited every morning. That night Sarah began quietly packing. The half-built room stood dark in the moonlight, skeletal, unfinished like Wild West romance stories, everything else. The blizzard came down like God's own fist. No warning, no mercy for 3 days. They were trapped. The boys huddled under quilts playing games Sarah invented. Cole kept the fire high, the coffee strong. Outside the wind screamed. Inside something broke. It started with silence. Sarah sitting by the fire staring at nothing. Cole recognized that look. He'd worn it himself for 3 years. Talk to me, he said. About what? Anything. She looked at the boys asleep in a pile like puppies. Their father was a good man. Careful, cautious. I begged him not to go into the mine that day. I had a dream. I knew something was wrong. Her voice cracked. He went anyway. The shaft collapsed. 20 men died. I couldn't save him. Cole sat beside her. I couldn't save them either. Eleanor and Daniel. He nodded. Fever came fast. She begged me to fetch the doctor, but the storm I tried. I rode all night, but by the time I got back, he stopped. The words stuck like splinters. Sarah's hand found his. You can't fight a storm. I should have tried harder. You would have died too. Then there'd be 3 graves out there. He looked at her, really looked. Her face was lined with grief and work, but her eyes were clear, honest. She'd lost everything, same as him. But she hadn't stopped fighting. You saved those boys, Cole said quietly. That's more than most folks ever do. Sarah's composure shattered. She wept silent, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and dark. Cole held her, clumsy but sincere, the way a man holds something precious and fragile. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but steady. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. The kiss was tentative, barely there. Testing, then deeper. Grief recognizing grief, loneliness, finding solace. The fire crackled. The boys slept on. The storm raged outside. But inside, 2 people remembered how to be warm. The next morning, the storm broke. Sunlight poured through the windows, blinding and clean. Sarah was packing her trunk when Cole found the paper's eviction notice. Legal threats, county stamps. He read them twice. Blood going cold, what is this? She wouldn't look at him. They'll take my boys, the county, if I can't prove I have means, property, a home. They'll send them to an orphanage. Stories from the Wild West split them up probably. When end of February, maybe sooner if Calhoun pushes. Cole stared at the papers. The county seal stared back. Not while I'm breathing, he said. She looked up, eyes red. You can't fight the law, watch me. He pulled something from his pocket, his wife's wedding ring. Simple gold band. Pressed it into Sarah's palm. Wear it in town. Let them think what they need to think. You're under my protection. Legal or not, Cole, I mean it. You and those boys. You're mine now. She stared at the ring, then slowly slid it onto her finger. Outside, the snow began to melt. Spring was coming, but the fight wasn't over. She shouldn't have come to town, but they needed supplies. And Cole said it was time to face it down. He was wrong. The town hall was packed, every family, every busybody, every soul in Coldwater who had nothing better to do on a Sunday afternoon than judge their neighbors. Sarah sat in the back, staring heavy on her finger. Cole stood near the front, hat in hand, face unreadable. Mr. Calhoun presided from the raised platform, smiling like Asnake in Sunday clothes. We're here to address concerns regarding Mr. Cole Tucker and his house guest. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It has come to our attention, Calhoun continued, that Mr. Tucker may be exploiting Mrs. Brennan's unfortunate circumstances to claim her late husband's mining shares, unclaimed assets that legally revert to the county. Sarah's stomach dropped. This accusation, Calhoun said smoothly, suggests either impropriety or incompetence. Either Mr. Tucker is manipulating a vulnerable widow or he's been manipulated himself. He paused. We're here to determine which. All eyes turned to Cole. He stood silent, jaw tight. Mr. Tucker, Reverend Mills prompted, do you have anything to say? Sarah willed him to speak, to defend them, to fight. Cole opened his mouth, closed it, said nothing. Calhoun's smile widened. I see. Well, in the absence of clarity, I move that the county take custodial interest in Mrs. Brennan's situation, including guardianship of her minor children. Wild West love stories. When Sarah stood, the room fell silent. Every head turned her way. He didn't deceive me, she said firmly. I'm not a fool. Mrs. Brennan, Calhoun began, his voice soft but measured. No one's questioning your character. But you must understand, without property, without any legal standing. I understand perfectly, Sarah cut in coldly. You just want me out so you can take what's left of my husband's claim. And you want Cole's land because it's the only piece with water rights your railroad needs. A sharp gasp spread through the room. Calhoun's face darkened. Careful now, ma'am. Or what? She shot back. You'll ruin me? You already have. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Outside, the cold bit deep, and from behind she could hear the whispers. Women's voices slicing through her like knives. Always knew Tucker was weak. Couldn't even save his own family. Those words hurt worse than the wind. She didn't wait for Cole. She climbed onto the wagon and rode off alone. When she reached the cabin, she slipped the wedding ring off her finger and set it gently on the table. Under the dim glow of a lantern, she packed their things through the night and woke the boys at dawn. Ma? Ben mumbled, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? We're leaving, she said quietly. Why? Tommy whispered. She couldn't answer. Couldn't say because he didn't fight for us. Jacob stood in the doorway, already dressed, his face hard as stone. Where's Mr. Tucker? I don't know, Sarah said softly. He let them talk about you like that. He just stood there. I know, baby. I hate him. Sarah pulled him close. No, you don't. I do, she didn't argue. Just kept packing. Then she hitched the horse, loaded the boys, and climbed onto the wagon. Cole appeared as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, standing in the cabin doorway, hollow-eyed, empty-handed. He didn't call after them. Didn't move. Just watched as the wagon rolled away into the pale morning frost. Sarah never looked back. Behind them, the half-built room stood silent, unfinished, like every promise he'd made. Later, Cole sat beside the grave. He hadn't expected it to answer, but he spoke anyway. The silence in the cabin had become unbearable. I failed you, Ellie, he whispered. I failed Daniel, and now I've failed them too. The whiskey bottle beside him was half empty. He hadn't touched liquor since Eleanor's funeral, but tonight the weight was too heavy to carry. I'm a coward, he said bitterly. You married a coward. The wind offered no comfort, only emptiness. He thought about leaving, packing up, riding west, disappearing into the mountains where men went to die slow and forgotten. It would have been easier, cleaner. But then he thought of Tommy's wide eyes, Ben's soft songs, Jacob's burning anger, and Sarah's rough, tired hands. He pictured them alone in some freezing shack, Sarah working herself to death while the county circled like wolves. I don't know how to fix this, he murmured to the grave. Then came hoofbeats in the distance. Cole lifted his head, vision blurred. Old Moses dismounted. His blacksmith friend, the only man in Coldwater who'd never judged him. 60 years old, skin dark as night, built like iron. Once a slave long ago, he knew the weight of fear and the cost of courage. You done feeling sorry for yourself? Moses asked. Not yet. Well, hurry up, Moses said. We got work to do, Cole blinked. What work? Moses pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it over. This, Cole unfolded it. A land deed. 40 acres, Moses' own property. What am I supposed to do with this? Cole asked. You're gonna give it to her, Moses said. Make her a landowner. Legal. Then you're gonna stand up in front of that whole damn town and dare any one of them to stop you. Cole's hands trembled. I can't. You think Eleanor would want you hiding? Moses snapped. You think she'd want you sitting here, letting them boys freeze while you drown in self-pity? I didn't save her, Cole whispered. No, Moses said firmly, gripping his shoulder. You didn't and you can't. She's gone, Cole. Daniel's gone. But Sarah's still here. Them boys are still here. And you. His voice softened. You can still save them. Cole's voice trembled in the darkness. What if I fail again? Moses looked him square in the eye. Then you fail fighting. That's still better than dying on your knees. Cole's gaze dropped to the deed in his hands, then lifted toward the grave. Eleanor's voice echoed in his mind, soft but firm. Be brave, love. He stood, wiped the dirt and tears from his face. Where is she? Old line shack, Moses said. 5 miles north. Think she'll take me back? Moses shrugged. Only one way to find out. Cole saddled his horse and rode through the night. The air was sharp, the stars burning cold and clear above him. When he reached the county office, the clerk nearly jumped out of his chair. I need to file a transfer, Cole said. It's past midnight, Tucker. Then wake your ink, Cole said flatly. He signed the papers slow, deliberate. His name shaky but sure. Sarah had taught him that. How to write steady even when your hands were trembling. You sure about this, Tucker? The clerk asked. Never been sure of anything in my life. When he rode north again, the wind bit his cheeks and the stars felt close enough to touch. Sarah's face filled his thoughts. Fierce, proud, tired, beautiful. I'm coming, he whispered. The horse ran harder, breath steaming in the cold. Cole Tucker hadn't stepped inside a church since they buried Eleanor and Daniel. But that Sunday morning he pushed the doors open like a man with nothing left to lose. Every pew was filled. The whole town of Coldwater had come for service. Reverend Mills was mid-sermon about charity and judgment when Cole's spurs cut through the silence like gunshots. Heads turned. Calhoun rose halfway from his seat, his face tightening. Tucker, Sit down, Calhoun. The gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the Reverend froze. Cole walked straight down the center aisle, his boots echoing off the wooden floor. He stopped at the front, turned to face the congregation. You want to judge Sarah Brennan? His voice rang through the church. Then judge me. I asked her to stay. I built her a home. If that's sin in your book, then your God and mine don't know each other. Mr. Tucker, Reverend Mills began nervously. This isn't the place. Cole pulled a folded paper from his coat and raised it high. This is the place. This is a land deed, 40 acres with water rights. Legally transferred to Sarah Brennan. He turned toward Calhoun. She's a property owner now. Her boys have a home, and it's all legal. Any questions? Calhoun's face burned purple. You're a damn fool, Tucker. You just signed away your future. For her? Cole's voice was hard as iron. For family. Something you wouldn't understand. You know property, Calhoun, but people ain't property. This is an outrage, Calhoun barked. You're right, Cole said, stepping closer. It is an outrage. That you threw a woman and 3 boys out in a blizzard. That you schemed to steal what little they had left. And the rest of you sat warm in your homes and called it righteousness. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest. She's worked harder than half of you ever will, Cole continued. She's bled for every inch of land she stood on. And I'll stand beside her, till the ground takes me. He scanned the room. Any man here got a problem with that. Step forward now. No one moved. Then old Moses stood. I stand with him. The school teacher rose next. Me too. Then 3 ranch families, the delivery driver, the widow Henderson, one by one they stood. Not all, but enough. Calhoun's rage shook him. He shoved past Cole and stormed out of the church. Reverend Mills cleared his throat. Well, sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways. Cole didn't wait for the benediction. He turned and walked out. Behind him, whispers began to bloom, faint and hopeful like spring after a long winter. He mounted his horse. North. 5 miles. Sarah's face lit his mind again. Hold on, he murmured. I'm coming. The horse galloped into the bright morning light. At the old shack, Sarah heard the distant thud of hooves. Her hands went to the rifle, but when she saw him, head bowed, hat in hand, her breath caught. Cole. He dismounted slowly and stopped 10 feet away. The boys stood in the doorway, Jacob, Ben, and little Tommy. Jacob, Ben, Tommy. Cole said softly. Tommy couldn't hold back. He ran to him. Cole caught the boy, held him tight. Ben followed, wrapping his arms around his waist. Jacob stayed where he was, arms crossed, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, Cole said, voice cracking. I was scared, and I let fear turn me into a coward. You left us, Jacob said, his voice trembling. I know. Cole met his eyes, and I'll regret that till my last breath. But I'm here now, and I ain't leaving again. Jacob's face broke. He took a step forward, then another, until he was pressed against Cole's chest. Cole held all three boys close, eyes shut tight. When he looked up, Sarah was standing apart, silent, unreadable. The cold wind blew between them, carrying the weight of everything left unsaid. "I got something for you," Cole said quietly. He handed her a set of papers. Sarah read them once. Then again, her hands began to tremble. "You gave me Moses's land," she whispered. "It's yours," Cole said softly. "Legal. You and the boys, and you've got a home now. Whether you want me in it or not." He hesitated, searching her eyes. "I stood up in front of the whole town, Sarah. Told them you were mine. Told them I'd stand with you until the ground takes me." He drew in a shaky breath. "Should have done it weeks ago. I'm sorry." Sarah looked down at the deed, then at her boys. Then back at the man in front of her, hat in hand, heart in his eyes. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the wedding ring she'd left behind on his table, and slid it back onto her finger. "Then make it real, Cole Tucker," she said softly. "Make it a family." Cole's face broke into something between a laugh and a sob. He stepped forward, took her in his arms, and kissed her. Gentle, desperate, grateful, the boys cheered. 3 months later, spring swept across the valley, bright and fierce. The cabin stood strong now, the addition complete. 2 proper rooms, a front porch where Sarah could sit shelling peas and watch the boys chase each other through the grass. Cole taught Jacob to ride, patient and proud. Ben worked the garden beside Sarah, humming old songs under his breath. Tommy followed Cole everywhere, a small shadow with endless questions. Old Moses married them by the creek. It was a simple wedding. No fuss, just family and a few friends. Sarah wore wildflowers in her hair. Cole's hand shook when he said his vows, but his voice was steady as stone. In the weeks that followed, women from town began to visit. At first cautious, then kinder. Most brought bread. Some brought apologies. Calhoun left Coldwater in disgrace, his schemes exposed for everyone to see. The land began to bloom again. One evening, as the sun sank low, painting the valley gold and red, the family stood together in the cabin doorway, 4 souls patched together into something whole. Behind them, Eleanor and Daniel's graves were ringed with wildflowers the boys had planted. The valley stretched wide and green before them, full of life and promise. Cole's hand rested gently on Jacob's shoulder. Sarah held Tommy close, the boy clutching the little wooden horse his father had finally finished. Ben laughed barefoot in the tall grass, chasing fireflies through the dusk. "You ready?" Sarah asked, squeezing Cole's hand. Cole looked at them, his family, and felt the weight he'd carried for years finally fall away. 3 years of grief, 3 months of fear, all of it washed clean by one choice, and to love instead of run. "I'm home," he said quietly. Sarah smiled. "So are we." The sun slipped behind the mountains, the last light spilling across the valley like fire. Somewhere far off, a meadowlark sang. They walked inside together. The door closed softly behind them. Home, Cole thought, wasn't something you found. It was something you built. One hard day, one brave choice at a time, and sometimes, if the Lord was kind, you built it with people who needed building too. Outside, the graves stood peaceful in the twilight. Eleanor and Daniel, resting, remembered, loved. But life belonged to the living, and at long last, life was good, the end.